NAT, network address translation. We've talked about this many times. So you share the egress point IP address. So all of these computers look like they come from here, from the outside. On the inside, they all have their own address. So data comes in through the MAC address. That's how it gets back to the correct computer. But as far as outside systems are concerned, they have one IP address that they all show up at. So this was created in an effort to conserve IP addresses so that every computer inside the LAN did not need an external IP address. It's called NAT, or NATing. It allows sharing of the egress IP between all the devices inside of the LAN. NAT uses one-to-many mapping. Okay, so this is a test question. NAT uses one-to-many mapping. Static NAT uses a one-to-one mapping. So you have one IP address for this computer, one IP address for this computer, one IP address for this computer. The IP addresses are not inside the LAN. They all terminate at the firewall, switch, or router. Depends on what kind of device you have. There could be an all-in-one, but basically at the router, it's going to terminate, or at the firewall, it can terminate. So you could have all 500, say you have 500 computers on your LAN, you could have all 500 IP addresses on that firewall or switch. Everything gets routed to this firewall or switch, and then on the other side, it routes it to the proper MAC address. So that's how that works. So NAT uses one-to-many. Everybody shares the same IP. Static NAT uses one IP address for each computer on the inside. One IP address here for each computer on the inside. And what I mean is, this one would be 20.20.20.1, 20.20.20.2. 20.20.20.1 goes to this computer, 20.20.20.2 goes to this computer. Whereas before, in the NATing, we have one-to-many, they all use the same IP address. Well, how does that work? If this computer makes a request, how do I know that it's not this computer? Well, this guy keeps track of that in his MAC address tables. So he knows which request went where, and when those requests come back, they have the MAC address in them, so he can easily figure out which computer they belong to. And again, it was just to conserve IP addresses, which have been exhausted already. Backups. How do you know your backups are good? The only way to know is by verification, and the only way to know for sure that the data is valid is to perform an entire restore. So for the test and in real life, if you think your backups are critical, then you better go and restore them somewhere and make sure that you can read all of the files and that everything's there. That's the only way to know for sure. So another slide about encryption. We talked about some of these earlier. PGP, which is pretty good privacy. GPG, which is GNU's Privacy Guard. OS X and StarNix, and you can also get it for Windows too. They have some ports for this now. Windows and StarNix for PGP, pretty good privacy. There's an Enigmail plugin for Thunderbird, and there's also something called Mailvelope, which you can use to manage keys for like Gmail, any kind of webmail. You can use something called Mailvelope, supports Firefox and Chrome. PGP and GPG use asymmetric cryptography. What that means again is different keys encrypt, different keys decrypt, not the same key to do both. That's symmetric. Asymmetric, different keys to encrypt, different keys to decrypt. Public key infrastructure, a set of hardware and software. People, policies, and procedures are needed to create, manage, distribute, use, revoke, store digital certificates, and manage public key encryption. There are a lot of stuff to maintain. They take a lot of work. So it requires generating key pairs. So every time you hire someone, you have to generate a key pair for them. Public key, private key. What kind of encryption are we talking about? Asymmetric, right? Asymmetric encryption. Different keys encrypt and different keys decrypt. Symmetric, same key to encrypt, same key to decrypt. So initial key exchange, you need to send each other your public keys or attach your digital signature to the messages, and then they can extract your private key on the other end that way. Encryption of a message with receiver's public key. So you use their public key. So you type up a message and you say, I want to encrypt it. Obviously, it's going to use your private key. And then you got to pick whose public keys you want to put in it. You might put Charlie, Steve's, and Erica's in there. So now 3 people can decrypt that message. All 3 of them can read it. So key escrow, used to securely store private keys. Why? Key escrow, you don't ever want to lose your private key because you'd have to generate another one and then redo the message to see it. Key escrow is used to securely store private keys. The key management server is required because that facilitates revoking keys and storing them. So you have a place for your private keys, you have a place for your public keys. The public keys can be shared to anyone, no problem at all. So if somebody stole a repo of public keys, not a problem. If you stole a repository of private keys, that's a big problem. So the key management server, say you have an employee and people are still encrypting keys using his key and he has a copy of his private key, then that could be an issue. So you can go and revoke those keys so that he can no longer use them. So public key servers are used to store publicly available keys. So search by email address and stuff like that. There's one at MIT. Like I said, public key distribution is not a problem. The private key one is the problem. They utilize port 500. They have the IKE, the initial key exchange, and they're used in IPsec as well. RA, so kind of what the infrastructure looks like. We talked about the key servers and such. RA is a registration authority. They're responsible for verifying the applicant. CA is a certificate authority responsible for managing unique IDs, issuing and revoking, and answering verification requests. PKI uses RSA 1024-bit keys, but not in real life. But for the test, PKI uses RSA 1024-bit keys. 1024 is a very small key. We don't want to use that today. 2048 minimum, 4096 average. So in real life, the key lengths are configurable for PKI. So the last set of keys I generated were 8096.